20th, but before I died, New Mexico Festival 2024. Today we are at the offices of Death Doula Professionals and also Conscious Crossroads and the Life Studies Danielle Lupensky. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors who make this festival possible. That's me, a good goodbye, you know, planning for those who don't plan to die. The Bernalillo County Indigent Program, Better Place for Us, which we had Jess speaking to us at Passages International, which is another sponsor. End of Life Options New Mexico, Funerals and Cremations, and Keeper Memorials.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our space today. We are super happy to share. You want to move the plant? No. Well, plants. Michelle, thank you. So my name is Brooke Nettie. I own Death Doula Professionals.
And I'm Danielle Lupensky. I own Conscious Crossroads End of Life Services. So the two of us share office space in here. We do have two separate businesses, but we collaborate a ton, and we'll tell you guys more about all of that. But before we get started with the actual presentation, we'd like to kind of take a moment to shift the energy. Take a moment to acknowledge that throughout the, I don't want to be written, can you still see me? Throughout this conference, we're doing a lot of talking about death. Right? We're doing a lot of educating, we're joking, it's fun, it's entertaining, and it's very real, right? We miss our loved ones. So we want to take a moment to just light a candle, close our eyes for a moment if that feels comfortable for you. Take a couple slow, deep breaths. And if you have some loved ones that you would like to bring into this space with us, to help be here and honor their memory, we'd like you to take an opportunity to do that. Go ahead and get started. I have a quiet voice. If I ever get too quiet, raise your hand and let me know, please. I will do my best to project.
Here, so what we're going to talk about today is what we've been talking about for the last couple of days. So Danielle and I are probably going to go a little bit off of script because this is a lot of stuff that you've already heard. So as two death doulas who are doing this full time locally in our community, we want to share some stories. We want you to know some of the experiences that you might experience with us. We're going to, in general, talk about a lot of these things. We don't talk about death and death. We talk that death is a dirty word. The reason that Danielle and I both use the word death doula instead of end of life doula or end of life, whatever you want to call this, is because we're trying to bring that word back into normalization for us. We're trying to make it so that when you hear it, it's not such a jolting word for all.
Well, and like, you know, Gail's famous saying with the talking about sex won't make you pregnant, talking about funerals, the death won't make you dead. But just like with sex education, using the proper words makes a ton of difference, right? So when we're teaching kids, especially about death and dying, using the proper terminology, just like again with sex education is super important and can prevent unwanted consequences. So that's why you're going to hear us death, dying, dead. Those are the words that we tend to use more often than not.
There are a lot of fears around death. And probably for each of us, there's 2 or 3 that are out there that we haven't covered. Probably the one that we hear the most, or I hear the most, is specifically being hospitalized. None of us want to be in a hospital with beeping noises, as we're not. I've had experiences in both. I've had them at home, I've had them in hospitals, I've had them in care, hospital hospices. So if we can try and avoid some of the hospitalization, we're going to really try.
I'm curious, what are some fears that you guys have surrounding death that are not up here?
We're numb from 2 days. It's good. I had a fear of not being near my people, that I was gonna be pulled away from that. And then I would be with other people that is not my people, and I would be with them when they're fine, in the end times, I would be with them, that's not where I wanted to be. That's a wish.
The way I put it is, I'm not afraid of being dead, I'm afraid of dying. Afraid of some of them, especially losing mental capacity, that would be one of my big ones.
I think for me, it would be control. And I come from a healthcare background, and so I have concerns about the healthcare system right now. I keep telling people, don't just keep staying well so you don't have to access it. I mean,
Yeah, I've heard the phrase that in this country, we tend to live short and die long.
oh,
So how do we flip that? Anybody else?
Well, people, they're very uncomfortable. It's like in our society, we don't talk about it because it may be contagious.
Yeah, that's actually a big fear, especially in our community. With our Native American population, talking about death brings death. And so that is something that we're trying to both respect and talk about a little bit more. The traditions that Danielle and I do on a regular basis were traditions that we probably would have learned from our grandparents that could pass that down to us, that generational knowledge. And it's changing. We don't bring children into the conversation as much because we don't know if they'll be capable of understanding it. But what we're learning is just how do we have that conversation? I wouldn't have the same conversation with my 50-year-old brother that I would have with his 16-year-old son. I just wouldn't do it. So we use words that are better and easier to understand for younger children. And being exposed to these deaths at a younger age might actually help us deal with troubles that come later on, or give us the opportunity to know and understand how to handle a situation that feels uncomfortable.
Resiliency. And I feel like we should take a moment and take a step back. You brought it to me when you were talking about having a healthcare background, and we didn't give you guys any of our background though. Right? We just kind of jumped in because we've been so talking about this for the last 2 days. We're like, let's just dive straight in. And so I'll start, but my background was, I was a nurse. I was an emergency room and trauma nurse in California for about almost 7 years, and always did medical things. Prior to that, I was an EMT. I worked out in the field doing on-scene medical things. 2013, I myself got very sick, spent a long time in the hospital, had lots of surgeries, had resuscitation, CPR, and near-death experience. Shifted everything. So nursing kind of felt like being a mechanic to me. I was just working on the physical vehicle. I wasn't doing anything to help kind of what I now consider the animating force behind the eyes. Right? That's what I wanted to reach. And so that's how I've kind of switched teams, if you will, and gone from doing everything I could to keep the physical body alive to working on the rest of us, or with the rest of us.
My story is completely different. So there are two certainties in life that people like to joke about: death and taxes. I started my career as a CPA. I went into investigating as an accountant. That was really fascinating. Then I bought a construction company, which my husband and I ran out of this business for 13 years, or out of this building. And then twists and turns led me to death. So that's my final chapter. It's the place that I feel most passionate about. It's the place that I feel most fulfilled in my soul. And what I'm doing is my correct path.
So have to take a step back. So sorry. Back on now. Oh, there we are. There we are. The showroom.
Which can be scary when we walk into this. I think we feel that maybe the more money we spend after a loved one dies, the more we love them. And that's not necessarily true. So we can have different alternatives now. The story that was told recently to us about embalming, everybody still thinks they have to be embalmed. I'm gonna be right here with you right now. You don't need to be embalmed. If you don't want that, there is no law that says you have to be embalmed. It started in the 1860s with the Civil War. And it was when we were trying to get our loved ones from the battlefield back home. So they started the embalming process. Well, then all these people learned a lot about embalming, and then they turned it into a business. Great. Danielle and I are trying to turn this into a business as well. We understand the value of what it is. But we need to make sure that we understand what is required and what is optional. So that's what we're talking about now. Still serves a purpose.
You know, and the death doula movement is basically a modern resurgence of an ancient tradition, right? There have been people doing this for as long as we've been living and dying. And with conventional, or what we've come to consider traditional, but they're conventional practices, like she said, that have only been around since the 1800s, even the language we use to describe our homes still refers to this time. We used to all have home funerals, and we would lay the body out in the parlor.
Right.
So we have the living room, because the living people hung out there. That's why it's the living room, exactly. So we still talk about these things as if it's part of our lexicon, you know? So it's not that far back that what we now consider conventional was brand new, you know?
These are the new options that we have that are available to us again, that we are starting to bring back. We are very blessed to have La Puerta Natural Burial Ground here. It's a beautiful place. We talk about it often. When I meet with my planning clients on the first day, and they tell me everything they want to have done. And then at the end of that meeting, I explain, well, you can do La Puerta. You can have a natural burial. You can do natural organic reduction for body composting. There are other things that we can do.
How many people here are members of La Puerta?
On my way.
All right. So Jane Westbrook and a few others, that's how they now refer to those who already have their plots out at La Puerta. So, and for anyone who doesn't know, La Puerta is our only certified green burial cemetery, certified by the Green Burial Council that Darren Couch is the president of. It's just a little south of Belen, kind of up against the Manzano Mountains. Beautiful setting out there, just open prairie land, extremely natural. And like Gail says, green burial in New Mexico is really brown burial. That's what we have.
Options for you to be done, you know, gemstones, you can create diamonds. One of my clients that I just helped walk home had 2 daughters, young, in their 30s. And they wanted mom's ashes to make diamonds, so that they would always have their mom. So we can now take a more personal approach to once somebody's gone, body's gone, but their memory and their spirits. I currently plan on being parting stone. That's my current plan. I might change that after Jess's conversation earlier this week. But in my paperwork, I have it written down that I want to be cremated, I want to be turned into parting stones, and then I want them to be given to loved ones. And I want them to place them someplace outside of their own home that makes them think of me. So it keeps them going to a different place.
Cool. And for anybody that doesn't know, that didn't hear it before, so Parting Stone is a company up in Santa Fe that they take your cremains and through a process of compression and heat, they create these stones down here. And I think one of the coolest things about it is that everybody's stones come out different.
Oh, wow.
They don't do a different process on anyone. It's just as unique as we are in life, we are unique in death.
In crystal. Well, and one of the things I was surprised about on Friday was the volume. So how many stones do you get? I mean, do they use all of the cremains or okay?
And it's somewhere between 30 and.
30 and 40, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So a lot of.
yeah.
Have you guys heard the story about Mango at Parkingstone?
No.
So like you were saying, all the stones come out differently, so whenever they do a process and they peel, and everyone runs over and wants to see what the stones look like. And they opened it, and there were all these little stones that looked like mangoes, kind of green, kind of orange, and they were like, who, they didn't, the people doing this, didn't know whose cremains they were, so they run over, pull out the file, the cremains belong to a dog named.
Sorry.
Oh, I love it.
I just wanted to say a really kind of superstitious thing, since we're on the subject of the stones and the crystals. I had a boyfriend that, I don't know what they were into, they like the Salem witches and stuff. But he said they could take the spirit and put it in the crystal. And I looked at him like kind of crazy. I was like, I never heard that before. Why would you say something like that? But this is more like fundamental. That's a party side of superstition. But that happened in like the living room, how the living room became that name.
Yeah.
There's things that just did this stuff.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beliefs about what happens with spirit or soul or whatever words we want to use to describe that intangible part of us, right? For anybody that's been around when someone took their last breath, I think we can all acknowledge something happens, right? Something beyond breath and pulse cessation. Call it what you will, everybody has their own belief system surrounding it, but something happens. So we talked a lot about hospice yesterday. If there are any more specific questions, we can dive into those, but I think what's important for us as far as how doulas fit in is some of our stories about how we work with hospice.
So recently, my mom had fallen and broken her pelvis. And my family we've all talked about death for a long time, but when it's that close, it's hard. So I flew to Oregon to meet with her and my brother, that she lives with. And I talked with her about maybe what are your feelings about hospice? Not thinking that I was going to utilize my death doula skills with my own mother. So, and she goes, oh, it's fine. Big smile on her face. Jimmy Carter's been on it for a long time. We should get on it as soon as we can. Which was not the answer. Which is why now Jimmy Carter lives on our slide deck.
Yes.
He is changing the thought process around hospice.
Yeah.
And then it's not really utilized for the last couple of days of life. Because typically the length of stay is about 8 days on hospice. And we're trying really hard to explain the benefits of hospice to our clients.
And so I have not as much of a success story as I would love it to be, but I have been working with a client since February. She is neurodivergent and a very concrete thinker, has a hard time with any sort of abstract ideas and concepts. I have been working to get her to interview hospices, discuss hospices, kind of go through all of that. In the very beginning, when I discussed hospice, her response was, if I live longer than 6 months, the nurses will kill me.
Oh, no.
We've been working to dispel that since February. Just this past Friday, while we were at Passages, I get the crisis call.
Oh.
She has end-stage breast cancer. It's in her bones, and she is in incredible pain, like horrific pain. And with all of her medicines, we're having a really hard time kind of controlling that. So now they're ready for hospice, in crisis mode, 5 p.m. on a Friday. So I left the festival yesterday over at Bosque Trails to go meet with one of their nurses because they are my hands down favorite hospice in town, and got her admitted. But now it's 5 p.m. on Saturday, and in order to get her the pain relief and everything she needs, it'll probably come sometime Monday afternoon, maybe even Tuesday.
Oh.
And so I highlight this story, it kind of is a sad one, but is of the importance, like Brooke said, the earlier we do this, the better. Right? We at least have the hospice team ready to go to get out there as soon as possible to do the admission. But again, if we can get to this comfortable place of Well, he's been doing it for a long time, right? We're not gonna, nobody kicks us off in 6 months. The nurses certainly don't end our lives in 6 months. Certainly. So yeah, just knowing that we can get people better help if we have more time to plan things.
And that is a common fear around hospice. That's one of those, what happens at 6 months? What happens? And so.
So we have a very dear friend whose wife had late stage dementia. And he was her primary caregiver. And we could see the toll it was taking on him. And I did broach the subject of hospice for support, comfort for not just her, but for him, the whole village, you know, it takes a village approach. And he was extremely resistant. She didn't go on hospice until I think it was the last 48 hours. Because in his mind, it meant that he had given up and that he was ready for her to die. So again, it's that perception of what hospice means, not just what hospice can do, you know.
Like we talked about this extensively yesterday, right? All the parts of the team that you get when you are admitted to hospice service. The physicians, the volunteers, the nurses, the bath aides,
You forgot to breathe it.
I haven't, I'm not even done with the list. Oh, okay, yes, sorry. I was like, yes, and so a lot of times that's held by the volunteer coordinator or the spiritual advisor, the chaplain. There's a whole bereavement team usually that comes along with hospice care. And as part of the insurance benefit, you get that for 13 months after the death. Like Bosque Trail said, they continue that. Most hospices, I think, that are really, really good, I'll be honest, like the good ones will continue bereavement care, right? They care about you beyond that 13 months. Doulas working with hospice has been, I'll come out and say it, hit or miss, right? We are not licensed. There's no overarching regulatory body like there is for nurses and doctors and therapists and social workers and every other member of this team. Because of that, we're not reimbursable, right? And as we know, healthcare comes down to money at this point. It just does. Even the best of healthcare, it has to come down to who's gonna pay for that care. Because of that, doula services fall on the family and the client themselves. So it's private pay. That's a challenge for people. Some people, not a challenge at all. They're more than happy to pay for the extra support. They have more than enough resources. For those that don't here in our community, we have an entire network now. There's actually a sign-up sheet for anybody who wants to be involved with it. People that volunteer their time, people that offer their time at nominal rates, people that offer their services at premium rates, right? It's everything in between. But right now we are not officially part of most hospice teams. There are a few hospices around the country that are starting to integrate doulas, but it's few and far between at this point. Questions?
So how do you market your services and let people know?
Right here. One of the ways. Yes, so we do lots of events. We do death cafes. We do speaking engagements. I was on the radio with Gail just a week ago.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Educational opportunities, stopping and speaking at assisted living facilities. We're hosting something called Mortality in Merlot out at the neighborhood in Rio Rancho, where we're gonna serve some wine and we're gonna talk, right? Like a little liquid courage helps. So all the events and things that we can do to get out there.
And I met you at a car show, and it
Oh,
was
there
the
you go.
first time I realized that there was a profession. It's been great to get to know you and your work.
Thank you. And yeah, events like that. Like I did a tabling event at a car show. It was a veterans event. And so it's like anywhere and everybody that'll listen to me, basically. Same thing. Yeah. Sounds good.
Didn't the volunteers like do jobs or work for no money, but some type of other type of reward that's not money?
Barter. I think is what you might be referring to. And yes, in fact, lots of the pieces of art in this building have come from clients. And clients whose family members either couldn't pay or that's something that they had to offer. And so whether they themselves were the artist or it was their loved one, and we did grief support with them. And so yes is the answer.
What is the fee structure, and can you give me specifics of the type of things that a doula does?
We're gonna keep going. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I was kind of, a definition for hospice and a definition of doula. Separation in or.
So like we went over pretty extensively yesterday, hospice is both an insurance benefit and a philosophy of care. Doulas are a part of a holistic philosophy of end-of-life care, separate from hospice. We can work alongside hospice, but we're not technically a part of the team.
I'm just curious about hospice. Seems like the root word is hospital. Right, and then.
Hospitality.
Hospitality, okay, we can switch it, but that seems like. Hospice, when I see it, it's like all of the death that we've been talking about has got a component of illness. But there are people who die of old age, quote unquote, no illness, right? So hospice to me is why it's like you're not quite at the hospital, but you're in hospice, which could be the subliminal fear of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I completely acknowledge that, and I think you're right. And a big part of what we're aiming to do is demedicalize death. Because even death from disease is natural death,
Correct,
right? And it doesn't have to be medicalized.
correct.
It doesn't have to be sterilized, and that's what we tend to do with the process. And so I think the minute a person and a family system decides, I acknowledge this is the disease or the event or the catalyst to begin the dying process.
Right.
You can completely choose to switch over from medical care to community care, right? To holistic, heart-centered care. That also can include part of the hospice team, right? But it doesn't have to be the goal.
I just want to add, in hospice, when we were talking yesterday about the interdisciplinary group, team, interdisciplinary team, that when we discuss, we have 4 teams on Foster Trails Hospice. And when we meet, we don't just say, well, this person needs this drug and this, we're talking about the family, we're talking about the patient's psychological, spiritual, emotional needs. It's truly holistic. It's not medicalized.
And I'm gonna put in there just a second. Foster Trails is not like most hospices in Albuquerque that I have worked. I can't say that I've met with any hospice. It doesn't the way the Foster Trails.
And that's why yesterday I asked about not-for-profit versus profit, because it can be a very different focus.
It doesn't mean that the people that are there helping at that hospice aren't doing the best they can, or providing the best support and care and love that they can. It's just a little different than what we're experiencing with all of our conversations.
I think, since the word death is so loaded and we come up with, metaphors passed on and such. But for myself, I've been reorienting my thinking is that it's a natural part of a cycle. And so, I think part of what the doula education that I'm picking up on is helping people, because that sense of finality, right, and the unknown connected to the loaded word death, but that makes this cocktail of fear and anxiety. And whereas as a society, and I bet you there's lots of cultures, if you're an anthropologist, that are like not freaked out by it. So this really, this might be this psychosocial, emotional thing that as a society, we really need to go through this and get to that.
Let's go ahead and keep moving down this, and I think we're gonna hit probably a lot of the things you're about to, are you okay, or do you need to have a quick question?
That's what I need the definition of.
We're good, that's all, you know, it's coming, that's good. Give me a second. Okay, so we've talked a lot about hospice, any further questions about hospice? Okay, we got it. So death doulas, I'm gonna do this first. It's an ancient Greek word, doula. It means a woman who helps or serves, or one who mothers the mother. So often you hear of the word doula in terms of birth. There's a reason that doulas, right, we chose the term for end of life and death care as well. The similarities between birth and death are they're so closely entwined. Right, we say that the work and the pain and the effort of laboring life into the world falls on our mothers. The work and the effort and sometimes the pain of laboring out falls on us. So the environment that we attempt to create for a birthing mother, right, calm, serene, full of love, honoring whatever personal touches and sacredness that person wants and needs, same idea at death. But hopefully that helps kind of clear some of that up. And like you said, Ramsey, that's our goal, is it's part of the circle. You know, as humans, we pretend like we're outside of the circle because we have a physical box. Right, exactly. But like we decompose the same way as the leaves falling off the tree. You know, we talked about this for the last 2 days. So it's just what ways can we honor our part in the circle?
So this is the more modern definition, because we now know what the word doula means, but there's this whole new profession that's starting to develop. And it's more about holistic care at the end of life. And holistic can be the person that's dying, or their loved ones, or we can step out a couple more rings, and it's the cousins who haven't seen the family member in a long time. And so we wear the hats of everybody stepping out one layer further out. We talk about the rings of kvetching, which is basically the dying person's in the middle. Kvetching means bitching, basically. And so the dying person's in the middle of that. And then the spouse is the next layer. And then the children are the next layer. So Danielle and I, and death doulas in general, are always one layer outside of that person. So they can always come and talk to us, and they can unload their worries and their concerns on us. And then all we do is send love right back into the middle, right back into the person who needs it the most. Okay,
Yeah, just to stay on that for a moment, having everybody in the system have a safe space to go. Right, everybody needs somewhere to complain, everybody needs somewhere for support, everybody needs somewhere to just kind of, I don't know what I need or what I need to do, and I don't even want to talk, I just want you to sit next to me. Right, I don't need your help, I don't need your advice, I just need you to hold space for what I'm going through in the moment. And that's one of the roles of the doula.
so what up here surprises you the most? Of all of those little bubbles?
Financial planning.
So not all.
Not all doulas do that.
That's a new one. Maybe failure in that one.
So financial planning though, so I do have a financial background, so I do fit in this space a little differently than some of my other doulas. But what we all know is, okay, you have a very complicated estate, right? You've got properties in 4 different states. You've got family members that live abroad. We know the CPAs or the attorneys or the people that need to be in contact with you to answer those questions. Because how scary it is that when somebody goes, okay, you need a CPA. And all of us go, oh God. Why do I have to talk to an accountant? And that's where the piece comes in. It's one of those. I do a little bit more planning. I must say that my conversations almost exclusively turn to money, which I think is an interesting need in this space. And so even when my fellow death doulas go out and they have somebody who goes, hey, what are we going to do with mom's Social Security now that it's cut in half because dad just died? Like we talk through that. Here's what it's going to look like. So.
to highlight that, I currently have a family that I'm working with where, okay, so the daughter has hired me to help with mom and dad and her aunt. Right, so 3 in the same layer of generation, all have differing, varying levels of dementia. And so she's currently trying to navigate all of that and do all of the stuff. And so I've been great with the emotional side of all of that and then the spiritual conversations and whatnot. And then when it came to how do I help with the mortgage and this and that, it was like, phone a friend. Like, no, we need to do a Zoom with everyone, you know, and then kind of on the flip side of that, we've got navigating the medical system up here as well. And that's a huge challenge, right? Not knowing where to go or what to do next, or somebody to even help kind of translate medicalese. As doulas, we don't give medical advice. We don't give medications. We don't do wound care. I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I can look at your stuff and say, hey, this is what this means, right? I can help explain those things to you. And so recently Brooke called me in to help with a family where they were at the hospital and one of the daughters is an acupuncturist and kind of not into Western medicine and needed someone to translate basically, right? Take all the information that's being dumped on her and put it into terms and words that made sense to her so that she understood what was going on with mom and could make an informed decision. So having backup and knowing who knows what you don't know is huge.
How do you handle you as having a medical background when you're in your role as a doula and not giving medical care? How do you handle when you observe incompetent care happening?
Wow.
Oh, that was like right to the point.
I've become, as an emergency room nurse specifically, pretty skilled at stepping in and saying, hey, can you tell me why this is happening? Or explain to me what the rationale for XYZ is in a very polite, adept way that helps somebody in what they're doing. There were multiple times where I had to do that with doctors, anesthesiologists, trauma surgeons.
Right.
So I'm pretty comfortable doing it with whoever needs to be in a moment. Again, I can't give advice. I can't tell somebody what they're doing right or wrong or whatever, but I can stop and say, hey, can you just explain? Can you tell me what's happening here? I had a client, oh my gosh, it was a year and a half ago now. Her husband had a massive heart attack and was resuscitated. So he was on life support at UNM in the ICU. When they withdrew sedation, he didn't wake up. So now she's forced with the decision to pull life support. So even in that highly medicalized environment, right, of the ICU, we were able to do all of these traditions, right? Bring in a fake candle, light the candle with the family. When they pulled the tube out, we lit the candle. When he died, I had her blow out the candle. And I present her with the candle saying, you know, when you need to feel him close, call him in. I was able to talk to the doctors and nurses and say, hey, we don't need the monitors. We don't need the IVs. Let's disconnect everything, clean him up, scoot him over so that she could crawl into bed with him after they pulled the tube out. When the nurse and the respiratory therapist came in to just start doing, because that's what we do as medical people, right? That's what I did. I was the mechanic. I halted everybody. I said, hey, can we tell him what we're doing? And I said his name, and I said, this is your nurse. What's your name? This is your nurse, Ruby, on your right-hand side. This is your respiratory therapist, Rolando. You're now going to feel them undo the straps around your neck. It's probably going to make you cough and gag a little bit, but we're taking that tube out. And your wife is right here, you know, and just slowing everybody down because they're just in go mode. Yeah. And so just acknowledging it's okay at any point for any of us to do that. You know, and once I start kind of verbalizing what's happening in the room without telling anybody to do anything differently, they just, ooh, yeah, I should be doing that. And so it's just a,
So I really love the explanation of the way you have partnered together. Do all doulas or any doulas have a network, or are they working on their own, or is there a club or?
They're starting the club.
We are all very much an island, right?
Okay.
And I think, you know, we have several doulas in the room. When you all raise your hands. We have quite a few doulas. And so we're building that community support. Danielle and I joked that when we finally met and we clicked so well, we became an island of two. And it's good because we are very different personalities. We have very different backgrounds, but it's helpful for us to do that. We're encouraging that. There are some out on social media that like, we're trying, but it's taking some time.
And it probably varies community to community.
Yeah, and then we have the New Mexico Death Care Network that Danielle spoke about.
Okay.
And that's a great resource for all of us who work in this field, because sometimes we need a spiritual leader. And Danielle and I call Kelly, who's standing off to the side, didn't know I was gonna call her out. But she's a licensed spiritual counselor. And so when somebody doesn't want to have the conversation with their priest or their rabbi, we watched the movie last night, how terrible the rabbi was. You know, the movie that we were watching 2 weeks. We've got somebody who's kind and calm and loving and open-hearted to just sit and listen to your story about your religious life.
Have men entered doulership in history?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a handful in the group and the network, and we joke, are they doulos?
A lot of what we do is we hold that sacred space. So as a practicing doula, I have to do all of it. So I have to do planning, I have to do the bedside vigil, and I have to do some grief support, stuff afterwards. In order to keep myself balanced, I had 2 deaths in 1 week. That's a lot for everyone. You see them all shaking their heads, that's a lot. So the work that we do can be heavy. And it's something that with our support group, we reach out to each other and say, hey, we've had this now. What is the sacred space gonna look like for myself? I've done it now for 2 families. And what is that gonna be for me? And the group comes together and helps. We're all.
Any questions about any of the things up here specifically?
The question is, what about rural areas? How do we help support those people that live outside of our metropolitan area? There's a key term that people throw out called teledoula, which is basically teledoula, Zoom, phone calls, FaceTime, whatever works. We're fortunate, we have doulas all throughout the entire state. So from Taos, Las Cruces, Silver City. So we have resources. And Neil's actually given resources to people she knows in Arizona. So there's quite a bit of an out.
Well, I actually had a woman, so I did a podcast for a gentleman that was living in Hong Kong. A woman living in Wisconsin heard said podcast. Her father was dying in Florida, and I helped her from New Mexico. So because of the world we live in now and our interconnectedness digitally, it's entirely possible to do that. I so much prefer being in person. I mean, we can do a lot with the technology we have, and when it comes time to actual vigil time, it's really hard to do that stuff from afar. And so we will both travel, right, as long as people get us there, and we have a cot that lives here in the office, and we come and we spend the night with people. We spend the night in hospitals, they spend the night in your house, we're there as much or as little as someone needs, which is another kind of difference with hospice, right? They don't have that ability, they don't have those resources available to just come and spend the night and sit in the hospital with you for 22 hours straight. So yes, digital and in person is better.
Do you, the person that is the executor of your state, whether it's the family, plan, trust company, for me, it's a friend. And it will be a task for her to start dealing with all the executor functions. The house, the contents in the house, what to keep, what to throw away, where to give stuff. Do you assist executors?
I would, yes. That would be something that I would fulfill that need. Again, all of us kind of do different things. We have some doulas who only want to spend time on sacred space. That's all they want to do. So they want to create your perfect death nesting area. I'm a little more comfortable in that, so I've helped walk a couple of families through the financial questions afterwards, that,
I don't mean,
Well,
I'm saying in the house, let's say that this stuff.
Chief Toss donate.
That's later
That's
today.
this afternoon.
That's
Yeah,
you
that-
Yeah,
have
that's
those
right.
resources locally. So no, neither one of us, there may be other doulas who would, but neither one of us will sit there and actually go through the things with you. But we'll refer you to people like Miriam, who will be here later today, and other folks that that's specifically what they do. So if you notice over here on these bookshelves, there's tons of books, but then there are multiple files and accordion files and whatnot, and they're all full of local resources and local businesses. Everything from funeral homes, assisted living facilities, assistants transferring from home into an assisted living facility, junk haulers. I mean, anything and everything that we've amassed up to this point for local resources. So that's kind of what another one of the benefits is. We're like a little death library.
And like a death referral
Yes.
organization. I think it's important to note that I would have patient advocate up there, which is sort of like navigating the medical system, but you were acting as a patient advocate. I think it's important to note that at least half of those can happen way before the 6 months prognosis. So that you work with you guys and then say, oh, Danielle's my person when the time comes. But a year earlier, you're in touch with a doula to set up half of these things,
Yes.
not just at the end of life.
Thank you for pointing that out.
And one of the reasons that I came into this path is because there's 76 million boomers that are alive today. 13 million of them have no children, or they're solo aging. Solo aging being no family or not nearby. And that resonated with me. My husband and I don't have kids. I don't know what that's gonna look like. So it's like, okay, let's see what we can do to help make connections earlier, go through stuff sooner, help with that process in what we're doing. You had a question, please?
For your resources, do you interview who you're, giving the cards out and things like that for the resources, like to make sure, you know, that someone you're, you know, or, you know, like or trust or whatever, something like that?
So we don't have like a formal vetting process,
Okay.
but everybody in there we've met personally, and they're all local businesses.
Okay, for example, I do real estate and I could possibly have like listing packets for, you know, family, whether if they want to sell the property or things like that. Is that something I'd be able to give you guys and kind of maybe just talk about what I do and things like that?
Definitely.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so again, like we've talked about a lot with education and resources, and we're on that topic right now. Oasis Albuquerque is an adult learning center right here in town. The national nonprofit, we have a branch here. They put out a catalog every spring, summer, winter, fall. Both of us are teachers in there, just like Gail. So finding community events to give people an opportunity to speak and kind of walk through these things together. So it's not just the actual work with one-on-one clients, it's tons of community involvement that doulas do. Again, but I'm just highlighting again, as much as we can help navigate the system, we are non-medical support. We will always lean on medical people for medical stuff. We help with MAID, so medical aid in dying and voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. And ceremony and ritual is a big part of what we do. Go ahead.
Ceremonial and ritual is kind of a charged word. I tell people, like, I want to bring in some ceremony to help us remember the anointing ritual, so that as Dad is laid out, that's not the last memory that you really have of them. That it was like, I got to say thank you to all of the body parts that helped me to be the person I am today. We light the candle. All of those things. There's again some negative connotation around the word ceremony or ritual. Is it too woo-woo? What are we talking about here? Those types of things. So we help to bring that back and show people that it can be something different.
And also, I have referred, I'm a certified funeral celebrant, but somebody asked me to do a service when I was not available, and I asked Danielle if she could take over, and she did. And You did a great job.
Thank you. I did, and it was a really lovely ceremony where we made it very personalized to the gentleman that died. And Nikki was actually part of that. Nikki's also another doula here in town. And one of the things that we did was this gentleman had a seed vault. He was a huge farmer in the South Valley. And so Nikki took the time to create these beautiful little seed packets with his seeds and these beautiful labels, you know, explaining how to plant them and the instructions and whatnot, so that people got to leave with a living legacy, right? As a part of him that will continue on. Another way that I've done that is, I had a woman who used medical aid in dying, and as we're creating her vigil plan, one of the things we always ask, you know, what's your favorite music? What are your favorite flowers? What scents do you want in the room? Well, her favorite flowers were daffodils. It was October. So I went and I purchased bulbs of daffodils, and I put together favor bags for everyone in the family with a picture of her and a poem on the front about how daffodils are a symbol of hope and rebirth. And as these are laid into the ground, as I am, when they pop up next year, you know, it's time to shift our mourning process. And so I'm still getting these photos from all over the world. We've got a sister down in Chile. So their seasons are different than ours. So all year long, I'm getting these daffodil photos. It's really cool.
I just want to make a comment on the rituals, and this room probably knows it. And Mary, I'm going to call you out in just a second. When you talk about rituals and rites and those kinds of things, you go with what their belief system is.
Yeah.
Because I know, and some of you may be familiar with the film, The Last Ecstatic Days. And I know, Mary, you were talking about that you had a showing, and some people asked, is this what doulas do? They do it this way? And so it's whatever fits for the family and the person and the.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, I think, what Brooke is highlighting when she says that these are charged words.
Yes.
They're going to mean something different for everyone. I, brand new baby doula, got myself in trouble using these words. So I was hired by the sister, who's from Portland. The brother from Texas wasn't having it. Right? And yet it was just right, like a totally different ballgame. And I said, we're going to do an anointing ritual with your mother. And he lost it. I mean, he cussed me out and like stomped up the hallway in the hospital. And we continued because the mom was very much into it. It's what she wanted. And so we did it. And for the rest of the week, he basically would not acknowledge my presence. Like, I would say hello, he just wouldn't even say hello back, just nothing. The very last day, as his mom was getting closer, on my way to the hospital, I stopped at Chili's and I bought him a 3-meat plate. I got sausage, beef, and ribs. And I laid out a beautiful meal for him, and he came in and inhaled it. And then he was my buddy. And then we talked, and then he was able to kind of get there and process. And so recognizing that in that moment, not taking that personally, right? I could have used different language that would have helped, but he just needed somewhere to dump that anger from. And so I left it there in the hospital corridor, right? It's not mine to pick up, but I left him room to have his moment. Do what he needed to do, and I didn't try to push him one way or the other. I just fed him meat.
Sedated.
I got 2 important descriptions. I got dying words, convection, which I didn't know, that's a new word to me. That means to ditch while you're dying on the deathbed.
Jewish.
Oh, that's what you were saying. From the Jewish girl in the room. It's fetch.
Oh,
KVETCH.
Thank you.
Fetching. Fetching.
No, it's not
All right.
that.
Action. Recognize it said that way. It's that same.
And then carved words with under ceremony, ritual, death, anointing that trigger people and trigger words.
Some people.
Yeah, not everybody, but it's just important to be aware. I want to highlight home funerals. This has been something that's making much more of a resurgence. And it's something that we can do now, right? We have Laporta available. Whenever they are available, they will transport a body for free. So you can be on hospice, die at home. Preferably you've got help, a doula, somebody involved that's helping out with all of that. Your body doesn't physically have to go to a funeral home. We use the funeral home to process the death certificate here because it won't happen fast enough otherwise. But a body can stay at home in New Mexico for up to 24 hours without cooling and for up to 72 hours with proper cooling. And that looks like ice packs that are specifically made for the job that were put against the torso. But as we've talked so much about money and finances and whatnot, like this is a really expensive proposition, right? Dying is not cheap. And so there are ways that we can bring back kind of ceremony and ritual back home and save a ton of money in the process, if that's what fits in your realm of preferences.
I was out of town, I can't remember where I was, but there was an old house and it had two doors, and one was the funeral door. It used to be that when bodies were regularly left at home, they had a wider door for when you were going to be taking the casket or the body out.
Wow. We always talk about having our advanced directives done, right? Getting our wishes on paper. We did the whole 5 wishes workshop yesterday. Even in the medical field, we are not great at having these conversations. We just throw terms out there. We just say things. Do you want to be a no code? Do you want to be a full code? Do you have your this done? Where's your POA? Where's your DPOA? And it's just acronyms and letters, and it's a nightmare. One of the big things we do is educating people on what all of this means. Right? What does it mean to have CPR done? It's not like it is in the movies. You're not going to have CPR done and sit up and now say this beautiful, poignant thing and like gasp for air, and now you go about your day. Not how it works. These survival rates here are listed for if you have a witnessed arrest, meaning that people see it happen and immediately get an AED, the shocker machine on you, and do something about it. I was recently working with a client who is on hospice now, and her social worker from hospice was there. This was not Bosque Trails. And the woman was still a full code, meaning that she wants everything done if her heart stops. She wants CPR. She wants a breathing tube, but she's a hospice patient. Those two things don't really coincide together. There's obviously a lack of education. The social worker said, "Do you still want to be a full code?" And she said, "Yes." Social worker said, "Okay," and went about the rest of her questions and paperwork. So I said, "Excuse me, can we stop for just a moment and make sure we understand what that means?" Just like, "Excuse me," just pause. And after explaining what CPR looks like and what is likely to happen to her 85-year-old frail body, she signed her GNR. She wants to be done with that. She no longer wants to be a full code. So knowing what all of this stuff actually means, if you don't know, ask. Right? It's okay to not know the answers to this stuff. Not everybody does, and it's okay to slow down your medical professionals. Right? Even if they seem rushed and hurried, oh well. Right? Oh well. You need to have these answers. Sorry. That's my medical soapbox.
Talk about
We
medical
talk about
aid
this a lot.
Yeah, with the 11 jurisdictions.
These are the New Mexico requirements. We've talked about these pretty extensively yesterday as well. But the residency, right, there's nothing in the law that specifically says what being a resident means yet. You just have to be physically here. Medication has to be consumed here. 18 years or older, you have to be able to make your own medical decisions. You know who you are, where you are, what's going to happen when you drink this medicine. That 6-month terminality, right? That if left untreated, your disease process is likely to end your life in the next 6 months. And you have to be able to self-administer the medication. Questions? You have a medical aid and dying story you want to share?
Yeah. I had a friend's father who had long-term illness since he was like probably in his late 30s. He was now in his late 70s. So long-term thing. He didn't qualify for medical aid and dying to begin with because he didn't have that 6 months terminal diagnosis. So he went through all of the steps to do what's called voluntarily stop eating and drinking. And then some hospice team became very compassionate about what he was at. And the hospice team allowed them to see what was going on and understand that once you stop that, time, and something medically shifted in him. I don't know exactly what that was. But so he was able to drink the liquid, but the family was so divided in what the medical aid and dying was that it allowed me to understand on a more personal level, how medical aid and dying affects all of us that live. One sister told me, this is what he did, it was the best thing I ever saw. One sibling, one brother told me, no, he died peacefully in his sleep. So it helps me understand that when I do work with clients that have medical aid and dying, it helps to say, how is it going to impact each of us who are sitting around our loved one, and have more compassion and more understanding for what it is that they're thinking. Medical aid and dying is a gift that I believe is wonderful, and I'm glad that it's and my experiences have been positive with it. But again, it's talking with the hospice and maybe preparing the family earlier and having more of those discussions of this is what it's going to look like when they do drink. It's going to be not taste great. It's going to burn their throat. Here is what to expect. Because once they've ingested, like, you know, they go into that sleeping coma in about 3 minutes-ish, then it just looks like a natural death after that. That's the piece that I think we forget to tell people, is it looks just like another loved one who is going through the natural level. And it's peaceful, and it can be really a gift that the dying person can have.
I had the opportunity to participate with a client in May. Really, really sweet gentleman. And he had end-stage prostate cancer. He went back and forth for maybe 2 months as to whether or not he would utilize medical aid and dying. He qualified, the prescription was written, we would set the date, and then he would change his mind. Set the date once, family flew in from all over the place, changed his mind. Right, he changed his mind as to what he wanted for his body disposition several times. You know, he was going to be buried out of La Puerta. We purchased the shroud. We were going to have a shroud decorating party. And then the next time I went back, nope, I'm going to be cremated. And so it highlighted, the flexibility needed to do this job and to not hold to any particular shape at any given time. But how hard this is and how hard it is to make a decision. And so in sitting down with him one day, he goes, I just need somebody to set the date for me. I can't be the one to decide when I leave. I'm okay doing it, but somebody else has to set the date. And we talked through that multiple times and explained that it can't really work like that. You know, like this has to be your decision. And he also a couple times called and he was like, I want to do it today. You know, I wanted it to be a very quick. It's like, no, it can't work quite like that either. You know, there are no do-overs. There are no take-backs. You know, this is the final thing. So finally, one day he calls and he goes, Danielle, I'm tired. And I said, okay. That was that big shift. And more often than not, that is the reason that we get that people tell us when they're ready and when we know it's okay. Now we've made a big shift here. Very rarely pain, right? There's so many amazing things we can do for pain relief. It's at home, in the hospital, whatever setting now. Pain is not often the reason. It's I'm tired and I've lost my independence to a line where I've crossed my line in the sand. So that's one of the first things we talk about with folks is what's your line in the sand? And that's going to be different for everyone. The medical system will always err on the side of keeping a person alive until there's legal paperwork in their face that tells them otherwise. So that's a big part of why we do so much of this education and whatnot, to have that paperwork in place and suggesting medical alert bracelets and medical alert necklaces that have DNR on them. You're completely right. Most often, CPR is going to be initiated in the field, right? Meaning outside of the hospital system. So that's where we fall into that sticky spot of having to withdraw life support from folks. Because often we can get them back, which means we have a heartbeat, but are they there? Right? And so now somebody has to make that decision to withdraw care. And that's really, really hard, which is a big part of why I switched teams. Because I have done CPR on very old, very frail bodies. I have broken lots of ribs. I have punctured lungs. I have helped put in, it's called an IO. It's an interosseous drill that literally you can either drill into somebody's humerus, their sternum, or their shin when you can no longer get a vein. So I've done all of these things to bodies and I can't do it again. Yeah. Great.
Before we end the session today, I'd like to know a little bit more. I know you said that there's no regulations about death doulas, but how did you get trained as a death doula? And what kind of training is available, not just in Albuquerque, but outside of Albuquerque?
So the question was a little bit more about death doulas. How do they get trained? In state, out of state, there's no regulation, stuff like that. So currently, there's that no overseeing body that we talked about. Doesn't mean that those of us who would do the work don't want to be educated. I think a lot of us do continuing education constantly to learn new aspects of them. I utilized a school called Doula Givers International. Right now, all of the schools that do training for doulas are mostly online. There is one out of Ohio that you can go to in person and do, and then INALDA, which is another training organization, International Association of
International
Doulas. Thank you. They have courses that you can fly to and do like intensive courses.
Everything from a 2-week intensive course at a hotel conference room to a 6-month online training program and everything in between. And you don't have to have any of those certifications to hang up a doula shingle. Anybody can call themselves a death doula. And there are people that are death doulas that have done it for as long as they've been alive, but never needed the certification because it's just the role that they've taken and they just do these things in their lives and for their community. So technically nothing is the answer.
So
For
you get in there
somebody-
quick.
Well, I don't want to get in there quick. I want to get in there good. All right.
No, I mean, in terms of,
Well,
it will get to a point. where
It
it's
will, but
regulated.
I want to know what is available here to be able to do it well.
So then we offer, Danielle and I offer a class called Wanna Be a Death Doula.
Okay.
It's a 3-hour course that we have here in this room. And we explain to you what the day in the life of a death doula really looks like. The nitty-gritty of it.
And we go over 5 or 6 of the major training schools, their time commitment, their financial investment required, and any of the feedback that we've received from doulas that we know personally about how they received their training program, how they thought it went.
Okay.
So it's way too much information to try to throw in a quick little soundbite for you. But
Sure, I know, but I was hoping for a little bit more in that area, I guess, over the course of the weekend. Are there people that take people who want to be death doulas under the wing for the practicum? Because I actually took a course at the university, through the University of Vermont, in their course, through the medical school there. But there is that's the kind of thing you can learn online. So I have a lot of knowledge, but the practical, how do you get that practical, a practicum, for example, an internship, those types of things.
You can say it, but at our hospice, we have a new volunteer onboarding and she's in training to be a doula. She has other skills. She has a good background. But one way is to do some volunteer work.
I am a volunteer at the Cedar Valley.
Okay, so yeah. And you just get some experience. I mean, not as much as you have, but right.
I highly recommend if you're interested, volunteer with hospice. And volunteering with hospice is not the best place to get hands-on death doula experience.
Right.
Hospice volunteers, generally they're looking for people offering respite care, offering emotional support and time with the patient, playing Scrabble with grandma, that's less of what doulas do.
Right.
Not that we cannot volunteer our time and be hospice volunteers. Right now, I don't know of a specific hands-on training program. Part of this New Mexico Death Care Network and the things we're starting is trying to figure out how to do that. There's Scott's House in Santa Fe. There's a Nora opening up here, which are 2 community hospice houses, right, that are specifically meant for folks who don't have somewhere to go to die. To me, the next logical step is to create partnerships where they are receiving internship time while providing care, right? So how do we set those things up in the community? And so it's one of the million things on our lists of things to do and to try to get started and get working on because it's necessary.
So one thing I might mention, so before I did my training, I volunteered with the hospice for a year. And I was intrigued by the whole No One Dies Alone program. So I talked to the hospice about that and they said, yeah, let's do that. I was the only volunteer there who was retired, so I was available 24/7. So I became their No One Dies Alone person. And that's where I got the most experience because I'd get called at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whenever and go to someone's home and sit with someone while they're done or go to their nursing home or whatever. But anyway, just, you know, like, there's so much
here in Albuquerque.
You know, I don't know.
I don't either.
You know, a lot of the No One Dies Alone programs kind of crashed with COVID. Because that's when I was a No One Dies Alone volunteer, because I was so passionate about people not dying alone. How many people died alone? Yeah. During COVID, you know, so I think it's having trouble coming back. And then you mentioned Scott's House, so I volunteer at Scott's House too. Volunteering there is very much like being a doula, so if you do happen to be in Santa Fe. There's also another community model hospice opening in Harris, but and I thought they were gonna open in October, but I haven't heard. So I've been meaning to call them and find out what's going on. The other thing is volunteering with End of Life Options New Mexico. If you volunteer as a client support person, you will be functioning almost like a doula. And we love volunteers, so you'll heard it. What was that? End of Life Options New Mexico. Yeah, and there's a form online where you can apply to volunteer. And then you'll probably get a call from me.
We have a comment in the chat from Carolyn. She says, I trained with the Conscious Dying Institute, a 6-month program online.
Me too.
The practicum aspect is lacking with online programs.
It is. It's lacking with all of them. And part of one of the things we go over in that 3-hour workshop is the different focus of each of those schools. Where like I had the medical background. Brooks School has a really good setup where it's like these are the 10 most popular, right, most common ways people die or diseases people die from in this country. Like I didn't need that part. My school was much more, I like to use the term fluffy. Right, it was really great with all the guided meditations and the ceremony and ritual and the squishy stuff. So it depends on what your background is and what you're bringing to it before you start as to which program we would recommend for you.
Oh, okay, good, thank you.
Yeah. She's asking if it's helpful to get a DNR tattoo or B, wear medical alert jewelry. And I would say that they're both helpful in that they give people pause. Neither one of them are legally binding, right? Because anybody can put on a bracelet, anybody can put on a necklace, anybody can get a tattoo, right? And you can always revoke your DNR if you choose to sign one. You can change your mind. Not the same way with the tattoo, right? So anyway, when you put like a big note through it, and then so cross it out. Yeah,
Dual recessive.
I think for most of us walking around fairly healthy, it's not as big of a concern. But if you know that you have a terminal illness, you're already a hospice patient and you know you don't want further treatment, you know you don't, carry your paperwork. 100%. Like there will come a time when it becomes important for all of us to have all that stuff on hand. Like they even make little perfect, like wallet size advanced directive things that you can get through 5 Wishes and multiple other places online. You can shrink down one and laminate it. Really? Yes. I know a few people that carry all of their paperwork with them because they're very smart. Take a moment to officially close the sacred circle that we opened up together with our loved ones. And so if we can all just collectively blow out our candle.